All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming back to the Spring Fellowship session. Before I turn it over to our speaker, just a few housekeeping notes. Last week, I sent a summary email after our launch conversation that had a few action items requesting everyone's mobile number to be added to a WhatsApp group. So far, I've only received two responses to that, which is why I've not yet created the group. So if you would please do that, it would be greatly appreciated, and then we can get everyone linked up. Even if it is in your email signature, please just send it to me again so that I can have it all together. That would be greatly appreciated. I have created, oh, I should not take credit where unnecessarily. The communications team within the criminal justice section has created a flyer for our speaker series this semester. So in the summary of today's conversation, as well as a link to the recording, I will include an attachment with that flyer with the hopes that y'all will circulate that and get additional folks participating in each of our Friday sessions. As we discussed last week, our preference is to open these conversations up to the general public and promote additional participation at each of our sessions while continuing to reserve likely the last 30 minutes of each for us to have a breakout group closed discussion about our findings and impressions from the talks. So if you would please support me in sharing those widely, it would be greatly appreciated. On that note, today we are honored to be joined by Lisa Broderick, who is the founder and director of Police2Peace, a 5-year-old national nonpartisan nonprofit corporation formed to redefine, reimagine, and advance policing on a national scale through the framework of police officers as peace officers. In 2020, Police2Peace expanded its program to include peace officer wording on uniforms and was awarded municipal contracts to bring communities and police together after critical events such as police-involved shootings. It has a very impressive history and has done a great job of promoting this new understanding of what a peace officer can mean and the change that it can create within departments. Lisa holds a BA in economics from Stanford University and an MBA in global finance and management from Duke University. She's president of the Rotary International District 5330 E Club of World Peace, a member of Mediators Beyond Borders International, the United Nations Association, the Alliance for Peacebuilding, and Women in Technology. And I was very keen to have Lisa with us today to provide us with a grounding and launch pad for what it means for police to be peace officers, and it can provide us with greater appreciation of how we are understanding the potential for policing and a community-oriented approach, recognizing we'll be building on it throughout the rest of the semester with a deeper focus in technology and how technology informs the work of law enforcement today. So Lisa, thank you so much for being with us today. I'll hand the floor to you.
Wonderful. Thank you all for being here, and thank you so much for having me. As Jessalyn mentioned, we are a 5-year-old nonprofit that I founded. I was just asked earlier on a call, why did I do this? And the answer is, I was a high technology executive, and I'd done a lot of work in a lot of ways, but the work wasn't fulfilling for me later in life, as I wondered about my impact on the world. And I looked around and I realized that the interaction of police with community, as we were talking about just before the class started, is one of the most important things in public safety and in the community. Cops are the most visible face of government in any community. If people have public trust and confidence in the police, they will rely on the police to navigate situations for them, and they will call them. When they do not have public trust in the police, meaning public trust in institutions, they will take matters into their own hands, which is what we're seeing today. And so that is an issue, is very top of mind for politics, for the type of conflicts we see in the United States, the divisiveness around the nation. And police officers are on the front lines of everything, as we mentioned, from hate crimes to domestic disputes and everything in between. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and take you through a PowerPoint that we put together for this. And so let's do this from the beginning. You can see we have a We have a vehicle here, and actually this is one of our vehicles. This is Ashland, Oregon. And because the program started, Jesslyn said, we started actually a little before 2019 in 2018 and 2019, putting decals on fleets of police vehicles in order to test whether the public would change their perception of the police and whether the police would change the perception of themselves. I'm an economist by training, which is why I went to business school and also Stanford economics. So I really wanted to know, did this have an impact on public sentiment about the police? And the fact is it did. It's very hard to test whether it actually affects public safety because that is a long-term longitudinal study. Crime stats, very difficult to get a hold of and to have in a reliable way, especially for around the nation. But we could test sentiment, and we have in fact done that, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So why do we really need this? Well, you know, as was famously said by Albert Einstein, if you continue to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result, that's the definition of insanity. Well, the United States is a little bit insane when it comes to things like this, and that is policing. While it is operationally much better, than it has been in the last many decades, and probably the best it has ever been. Still, we felt that there was a need for a new mindset, in particular in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, where communities were very much at odds with the police and how they felt they were being served by the police. So that begs the question, why are we here today? Well, we're here today because of the images on this collage, right? These are all of the types of sentiments. These are all of the types of things from so many cities around the country that really came to a head in that very public killing. And we had a reckoning of ourselves as a country and our thinking about policing and the police of themselves. I would say because of that event and because of a confluence of a number of events, not the least of which was the pandemic happening at the same time, the advent of technology, which allowed a lot of these pictures, and in fact, the filming of the murder of George Floyd to be filmed on camera, which may not have happened in the past. Therefore, people wouldn't have known about it. The confluence of many, many events led to this and led to a time in history where we were really considering what is policing? What is the purpose of policing? What is the true purpose of policing? And so we talk a little bit about the problem. What is there today? There's a crisis of trust and confidence in policing. Where does that come from? A variety of things. Again, not the least of which is it's being filmed. In fact, police kill about 1,000 people a year for decades going back in history. And although it varies a little bit, it doesn't vary by much. So while there's a perception that policing may in fact be much more lethal than it is, that is actually not the case. Most officers never even unholster their guns in their entire careers. Some do, and we hear about those and we see those, but we don't see all of the other things that happen in policing. And that, with everything that's happened, the videoing of it, the fact that George Floyd existed, and don't mistake my lighting on that as being the most important, the many, many, many incidences that we have seen, going all the way back to Rodney King and even before. So thinking about communities, thinking about how do we want to be served by the police? And how do the police want to go about serving their communities, protect and serve? But there's a significant negative narrative about policing. And that is defunding and abolishing the police. I will say 3 years after that took hold and a lot of cities defunded their police, they are refunding the police because of the rise in crime and the inability to deliver public safety in a way that keeps communities safe and keeps officers safe. And what we think of as the lack of national coherence around policing. Well, what do I mean by that? So what works in Boise, Idaho may not work in Portland, Oregon, or in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, or in Washington, D.C. Policing is inherently local. You've heard the term all politics is local, all policing is local. So what is the national coherence around policing? What should they be doing? And I think you as law students, you certainly know this, and that is because of the federalist nature of America, the federal government does not govern policing in the United States at all. There are laws, there are Supreme Court rulings, for instance, that govern use of force. There can be some sort of laws. With that said, it's governed by the states. And from there, it's governed by the counties, and from there, it's governed by the cities, meaning we have a patchwork of 18,000 different police departments with literally 18,000 different sets of policies and procedures governing their community. Literally no national coherence around policing, around what we expect from policing. So what are elements of the solution? Well, these are things in our research that we've discovered. It has to be realistic. Here's what's unrealistic. Police carrying no guns. That's unrealistic. because of mental health, criminal behavior, drugs, all of the things that happen in society. We're just not well behaved enough to have police who do not carry some sort of firearm with today's society, especially given the remarkable number of guns which are in the United States. So it has to be realistic and it has to be sustainable. Some sort of curb on the police's behavior, which is here today and gone tomorrow, that's really not going to change anything. Police are here for their entire careers, 20, 30 years. So it needs to be sustainable over a long period of time and over many decades or even longer in these police agencies. It has to address the culture of policing. Well, what's the culture of policing? Here's an example. No amount of, no law or policy would have changed what happened to Tyree Nichols in Memphis. There was a law against that. There's a policy against that. In fact, the police department had a newly issued policy against that type of behavior, that, unauthorized or extreme use of force. That was a culture issue. There was a permission structure which allowed and has allowed many other instances in the United States to happen over time, which goes to the culture of policing. What is policing really about? Is it to serve? Is it to catch bad guys? Is it about, the adventure of policing, or is it about service? So we address the culture of policing, and the elements of the solution should. It acknowledges this, which is very important, the possible harm policing may cause vulnerable communities. We think of it this way. What are the unintended possible harmful consequences of policing's well-meaning actions? Think about drones. Drones are a wonderful technology. You were speaking about technology earlier. Well, a city gets them and they park them only over schools and communities of color. Well, how would you feel about that? Is that really, is more harm coming to the community? If the city says, well, it's too expensive to put them everywhere, yes, but how is that community feeling? Is there unintended possible harmful consequences? Gunshot detection, unintended possible harmful consequences, license plate readers, AI, facial recognition, all of these things we need to think of within the context which acknowledges the possible harm which may be caused to vulnerable communities. And the solution has to be one that creates opportunities for positive policing stories to be covered in the media. There's a famous line which says, bad news sells. If it bleeds, it leads. Well, unfortunately, we have a negativity bias in the country and in the world, really, which makes us more interested in bad news than in good news. When it's around a profession or a particular population, it frames them as though all that they do is bad. Therefore, people lose public trust and confidence in the police, and then they take matters into their own hands. Can you see it's a spiral where really, counterbalancing the news with positive policing stories is very important. And it emphasizes the importance of community interests, the common interests that the community and the police share in advancing public safety. We talk about it as co-producing public safety. Right here, you have a community member and a cop. This happens to be Columbia, South Carolina. Most of the photos you will see in here are our agencies. That's one of our agencies, where they are working on, it was probably a response to a call for service, working on co-producing essentially public safety to make the community safer with what they're talking about. And then the last point, which I mentioned earlier, addresses the true and rightful purpose of policing. Well, that's a phrase you don't hear too often. What is that? The true and rightful purpose of policing. So what is the true purpose of policing? Right here in the photograph, that's another one of our agencies, which has peace officer on the back of a sheriff's department with 1,000 deputies. That's quite something. This was taken during the pandemic and during a George Floyd demonstration, where they were arm in arm with community members, as you can see. Well, the true purpose of policing, the term differs across times and regions and generations, as I mentioned before, but there are commonalities among perspective: to protect and serve, to keep us safe, right? We want to feel safe. As we know from research, it's more important that a community feels safe than that they are actually safe in the crime stats. Many communities don't feel safe, and they're very safe relative to other communities. Why is that? So what we feel is this: America needs a national framework that establishes a coherence, a widespread understanding of what policing should be, what it means to be policing, what the true purpose of policing is. And so again, finding policing's true purpose, realistic and sustainable. It doesn't demonize the police. Right now we have agencies around the nation, most of them actually, which are down as much as 30% in terms of new recruits because of early retirements and because new officers, new recruits do not want to become officers. We've thought a lot about that, and here's something, and that is policing may no longer be seen as noble. Think about that. Think about what that does to civic service and to public service, that an entire profession on which society, all of society depends for order and to control crime and disorder, it's no longer considered a noble profession. Therefore, fewer people are joining because of the pressure they might feel from their families or their friends. We need to change that, and we call it in the spirit, policing in the spirit of service. It must address the culture of policing, why they're doing it, and it has to work for both the community and the cops. You can't do things to the entire policing profession. First of all, there's no national law that you could actually do any, you could actually have a law which governed all police departments, because that's not how the United States works. So something else, something organic, something internal needs to work for both the community and the cops. And we say it's not passive, it's not just a term, it's a pathway. It's a pathway to a new framework for policing. So what do we want from policing? Well, we hear this a lot, guardians of the community, guardians of community safety. You hear that, warriors versus guardians. Warriors are warriors when they have to be, a police-involved shooting, a school shooting, a mass shooting, right? A lone wolf kill, a shooting. They're guardians of the community, and they have to be warriors when they need to be. For it to be these three words, which we've come up with, effective, it has to do what it says it does, it has to control crime and disorder. Any police department must be effective. It must be empathetic. What does that mean? It needs to understand what it means to walk a mile in the shoes of their community. It means that when you're pulling over a car with a family in it, with a taillight that's broken, and realize through conversation that it's that family's sole vehicle, and you have the discretion to not impound that vehicle, but you could ticket them. You could take away if it's an instance of not having a driver's license, you could take away the driver's license until they come with a licensed driver to pick up the vehicle. If you impound that vehicle, here's what could happen. That family can no longer have the breadwinner get to work on time, and they may lose their job, and they may not be able to feed their children, and their children will drop out of school, and the cycle continues. So it's very important, empathy within our law enforcement, that it exists within communities. And it has to be just. What is just? I'm sure you know what that is. It's constitutionally correct for everyone, not just for some, but for everyone. That's what we mean by just. It demands that all people are treated with dignity and respect, all people, from people who are houseless to people who may drive the fanciest cars in a community. For police and community interactions to be safe for all involved. Clearly, after the many, many recordings we've seen, communities of color, people of color feel unsafe when being stopped by the police. This is something we should all be paying attention to in terms of something we can affect within our communities and with our policing. A pervasive culture of policing that inoculates them from creating harm and abuse. How do we do that? They have a different ethos. They have peace officer first and warrior when they need to be. And then what we call rightful policing, as I mentioned before. What is rightful? Right use of. Is the right use of policing for community safety. And so I've mentioned before, and Jesselyn mentioned it as well, what we're advancing is the peace officer framework. Well, what is that? Well, the term peace officer is used in 70% of state statutes as the only term referring to cops. You may know that. And it's used in more than 80% of state statutes in some form to refer to the cops. So clearly it's at the DNA of policing as peace officer. So it's rediscovering the positive beginnings of policing. Clearly, and we'll show a graph later, policing does have roots that go way back beyond the first formal police department into slave patrols. We now know that. And then the police were professionalized, and then they were organized, and then they became policing and police departments. But really, the positive beginnings of policing is a place to start. A reimagining of the true purpose of policing, as we've already talked about, and repositioning in particular cops from law enforcement to peace officer. Think about that word, law enforcement. I'm going to enforce the law. What room does that have for the officer who stopped that vehicle we talked about with the tail light out? Where enforcing the law means impounding that car, even though they have the discretion not to. Or is their role to keep the peace within the community, meaning the systemic nature of the community, meaning all of the things that go back within the community that allow the community to thrive, including that breadwinner being able to rectify the problem with the taillight or the license or the registration and be able to get to work and feed their family and have a productive, safe community. So what is a framework? It's a set of guiding principles, and we hang these on here on these 4 principles, right? It's a critical paradigm shift from enforcing the law, right, which really doesn't, on its face, doesn't include any of these, But it's a paradigm shift from there and how policing is viewed today to this paradigm, which are the three things we've talked about: effective, empathetic, just, and it's what people want. Through our research of agencies around the nation, this is what people want. Communities always respond that they want their cops to be peace officers. Why wouldn't they? It's the police that we're bringing along the paradigm shift in terms of how they think about themselves. And so what is it about? It's changing the lenses through which cops see their relationship with the people they're entrusted to protect. That's what's important. Community members get it, but cops, especially cops who may have been in the profession a very long time or with a different sentiment, they may not think that this is what they signed up for. They didn't sign up to be peace officers. Well, I laugh when I hear that, mostly because mostly they did sign up to be peace officers, and that's what it is in the penal code. But from an energetic standpoint, believing that's why they are there, in order to bring peace to the community and enforce the law when they need to. So for all the reasons we've talked about, why should we do this? Well, the optics. Smartphones, social media, the internet, they compel policing to be concerned about this. Think about all the instances over the last 5 years that we would not have seen without cell phone cameras, without body cams, where we would not even know that those existed. And did they happen prior to it? Sure. And are they sometimes not caught today? Absolutely. But these reasons are why public safety is so intertwined with technology, because communities now are seeing things they didn't see before, and they are concluding that it's happening more, which it's actually not happening more. So for these very reasons, bringing peace officer to policing is a good idea because of the optics. The narrative, we need to change the narrative about policing. If the police are vilified and not trusted by the community, communities are less safe. We have a body of research which shows that communities that trust and have confidence in the police more are actually safer long-term. These are academic research studies which are demonstrating this around the country. So a narrative around policing, that policing is bad, all police is bad, there should be no police, that does not help public safety. And so that's another reason to do it. Change. Here's what we say to cops, and that is, if you don't create your future, someone will create your future for you. And and that is starting to be done with a lot of regulations and a lot of outside measures, we'll say, in order to curb behavior, in order to, quote, stop the bad apple cop. Well, as we now know from incidents like Memphis, that's not going to stop it, because there were no law or policy would have changed that. I say that over and over. So these police agencies changing their mindset while they still can, before there's an outside intervention, like a consent decree or a settlement order, a settlement agreement, is the way to go in order to promote public safety that they're a part of in the best sense of the word. And the opportunity, where there's a challenge, there's an opportunity. Clearly, we're at a crossroads in policing. With the public seeing what they're seeing and with the police considering their roles in the community, we have an opportunity for change. Well, let's talk about sustainability. I thought of this graph. For change to be durable, we have to change three things. First, you have to change the mindset. How people in their own minds, individuals, justify our actions and beliefs and worldviews and perspectives. If there's someone who believes that we should always just shoot people, I'm being extreme, then that is a mindset which is going to be at odds with their role in society, especially as a peacekeeper, but even as a police officer, because that's not their role. So we're changing mindsets in order to see themselves as guardians of the community. And then the structures, the individual police departments, the associations and connections, right? The culture, the interactions and bonds between the people, which further promote the mindset. Is it a collective mindset? Back to Memphis, that Scorpion team had a collective mindset that was okay. There was a permission structure. They didn't do that in a vacuum, and it wasn't the first incident of which there would have been a complaint. There were complaints against them. So there was a structure there. We need to change that structure. And then the institutions, the police departments, the municipal governments that have specific roles and norms and expectations which meet the needs of society. We have to meet the needs of society. That's what the police do. And so this is a term that's used in business. You might not have seen that. I don't know if you have, but it's called a big, hairy, audacious goal. Well, changing all of policing, 18,000 police departments, 800,000 officers, as there were a couple of years ago, we're down now, again, because of staffing shortages. That is a big, hairy, audacious goal. This is literally changing the way we think about the police and the police think about themselves. But honestly, there's no other way forward. We can't monitor the behavior of 18,000 different police departments. It is untenable. There must be some national way, and because there's no national law, there needs to be a national mindset, a movement a difference in the way we think about policing. So, you know, we talk about, this is a graphic I wanted to show because it shows the interaction, the culture between all the different things happening with people, you know, and what's happening in society. Life is not static, policing is not static. Something's happening right now with policing, right? That could change policing forever, tomorrow, right? Just as George Floyd happened. On May 29th, it hadn't happened, and by May 31st, the whole world was different. As we talk today, there are profound changes underway. There's changes in policy. There are changes in social norms. There are changes in the way people use technology. Think about AI. Think about the use of AI for a community member to file a police complaint report about something and they didn't write it because ChatGPT wrote it. Well, how do we govern that? I mean, the whole thing, we're just being changed. So much change is happening right now, you know, that it really is sort of dizzying as we try to think about it. But failing to change is a recipe for failure, right? If we're going to stand here and try to be static, we cannot. And most police reform efforts are not culture-centric. And for this reason, most police reform efforts do not work as an external curb on behavior unless the police or any population wants to change from within. Curbing their behavior from the outside is simply policing them, policing the police. Whereas, which is very difficult to do because of the scope and scale of the problem. Well, what we really want is we want police officers who are serving in a sense where they're serving their communities, where it is part of the culture. So we talk about this. You're not going to change policing. You're not going to order policing to do anything. You're not going to change or order anyone. We need to nudge. This is actually a theory in socioeconomics, nudging, the nudge theory, nudging the culture of policing into a better place versus shoving. We have done shoving. We did that after George Floyd. All of the reactions of the municipalities in terms of curbing their policing budgets, which they now probably pretty much regret because policing has been so underfunded in many communities that public safety has been impaired and they need to put that back. But as a nudge, you know, for policing, hopefully they're putting it back in a way that makes sense, that has their long-term societal goals in mind. That's what nudging is versus shoving. And so, as I mentioned before, the majority of states use peace officer in their legislative language. Why did most cops get into policing if you ask them? To serve their communities, to make a difference, to make things better. That's why they do it. You know, if we actually did a survey of police department recruitment web pages, and what we found is that guns and helicopters and rappelling down buildings were some of the most used images on these recruitment videos. And when you do that, you're going to get people who are seeking what we call the adventure of policing. Whereas on the recruitment websites, what we're really talking about is service, which is why most people get into policing in the first place. So we're at odds with one another, even on that level, right? And then what most of us think about when we consider good policing, what is good policing? This is good policing. This is a cop sitting down talking to a nursery, you know, a kindergarten class about policing, introducing them to the fact that he's there to protect and serve, and the nobility of good policing. You may not have ever heard that term. It's very important. I used that term before in terms of staffing shortages and the recruitment difficulties. If policing is not noble, seen as noble, then young people will not go into it. The police thinking of themselves as noble. And let me tell you, running towards gunfire when you have a pistol and they have an AR-15, that's noble. And they do it for perfect strangers. So we're talking about the nobility of a profession and why people do it. But it doesn't constrain the police from enforcing the law. This is a mindset, so it wouldn't do that. And as we say, it is what communities really want from policing. They want policing that's effective, empathetic, and just. Well, here's an example. This is an actual photo. These are the photos you don't see. This cop just gave his boots to this man who needed them. And that is empathy. That is walking a mile in someone's shoes. Is he less effective? No. Is he doing something that is unconstitutionally correct? No. But it's a mindset that caused him to spend a moment and take his time and his own money, by the way, in order to do this. So what is peace officer? It's smart on crime. It's not soft on crime. You know, that might be an allegation that some people would make. When the community likes and trusts the cops, communities are safer. That's smart. When they will come to the cops and tell them things which need to be shared instead of not sharing them because they don't like and trust the cops, that is not smart on crime. It's aligned with the community's values. Community wants engagement. Community wants togetherness. Community wants, as people say, everybody wants the same thing. They want peace and safety and security, and happiness and all of the things that we think about. And community peacekeeping, right? Remember the days, you may not because you're a little young, but cops used to walk the beat. They're starting to do that again. And then when technology hit, especially in police vehicles, they stayed in their cars mostly. And you had famous television shows like NYPD Blue. You're too young for that. With that said, these famous cop shows where they're in their cars all the time. Well, that created a culture of that, of separating the police from the community. That did not used to be the case. And so they're getting back to walking the beat in their communities, getting to know their community members, which is what community wants. It's community peacekeeping. And it's focusing on commonalities, what everybody wants, as you can see in this photograph. What it's not, as I mentioned, it is not soft on crime. Let me tell you, the sheriff's department is not soft on crime. And they have peace officer on every vehicle and peace officer on every uniform. So they are dealing with crime and disorder every day with the mindset of peace officers first. It is not inconsistent with policing's legal mandate in any way. It's not even a radical departure from policing's fundamental purpose. It's their name in the penal code. I mean, I just find the irony of that is never lost on me. It is not alienating to the people the cops are entrusted to protect. It is very engaging. The community loves it. It doesn't weaken policing's authority at all, and it is not costly or difficult to implement. In fact, it's free. We're a nonprofit, and we do this around the nation with support of municipal governments and the federal government funding police training. But adopting a peace officer mindset is basically free. It's their name in the penal code. And in fact, you can see this right here. This is an actual badge from the Vail Police Department where they're peace officers. But we get this question all the time. How is this different? How are peace officers different from law enforcement? Well, it's focused on facilitating peace in the community, right? Keeping the peace first, guardians of the community, and being warriors when they need to. It's a more comprehensive view of policing than other views. It's not just enforcing the law. Enforcing the law, again, back to the example of the car, the family in the car, enforcing the law is to impound that car and possibly send that family into a spiral which harms everybody. It harms the entire community. And it's what we all want policing to be. So we talked about this a little. There's a natural evolution in community policing. So you go back to the 1700s, 1704 in particular, with slave patrols, which were not police departments. They were actually civilian, as opposed to the army, slave patrols, which were, collecting, going after slaves for slave owners. The first East Coast police departments were really in the 1830s, Boston, Philadelphia, New York, those types of cities where they had the first East Coast police department. And you had a thinker on policing, Vollmer. And so Vollmer on policing was a time where policing was professionalized. It was turned into a more professional profession rather than who you knew and having the police someone in your family so you could get something special. Policing begins really in the 1970s and 1980s, and it began because it was adopted over from Britain, where there was Sir Robert Peel, who was a 19th century British statesman who used the term the police is part of the community and the community is part of the police. Peelian policing, P-E-E-L-I-A-N, Robert Peel, is the approach to policing that community policing adopted. It was fully embraced in the 1980s, around 1985. Where almost 60% of departments around the nation were doing community policing in some form. We do note, however, that it was never defined, and there was never a Police2Peace behind it. So no one ever defined what community policing was. It was just 18,000 implementations for 18,000 different police departments. Then 9/11 happened, and we had to focus on terrorism, where threat preparedness was number one on police agencies' minds. And then we get to 2016, we get to 21st century policing, which is the Obama administration, a real bellwether for policing, where police leaders from all over the nation, many of whom we know, came together to really formulate what is 21st century policing that meets community needs. And then as we think today, it is the peace officer mindset, which, as we say, delivers on the promise of community policing. Community policing by its name promised things, but it couldn't deliver it because it wasn't defined. We define it. It's effective, empathetic, and just. And just when I see there's a question in the chat, I'm not really able to see chat while I do this. We could do that later.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. And it's also not a question. I was just putting in a list to some of the Peelian principles, as well as I'm going to drop in a link to the report on 21st century policing.
Okay. So, we have this slide up here, what's in it for the cops? Well, you have to, honestly, the question, what's in it for me, seems cynical in some sense, but truthfully, that's rational consumer behavior and economics, right? Where people do things in their own self-interest, not in a way that's cynical or wrong, but in a way that is, advancing their interests and versus their group or in their group or their family. So what's in it? Increased officer safety and wellness. When the community likes and trusts the police, the cops are safer, definitely. In fact, there are many instances where the police come to the aid of a single police officer who may be in the process of being harmed by, someone they're chasing, something else that's happening, where the police will actually stand up for them, or in a riot. Improve public trust and confidence. We've talked about that. Recruitment and retention. We talked about this a little. Turning recruitment and retention around will take a wholesale change in the way society views police. And that's why the peace officer framework is so important. We call it hiring in the spirit of service. So we talked about guns and drugs and fast cars, right, which are on many of the recruitment websites for many police departments, which means that they'll attract people who are interested in what we call the adventure of policing, the adrenaline of policing, where what communities really want are they want peace officers. They want people who are serving and protecting them. They want people who are engaged with the community, who are empathetic. That's an entirely different reason, for cops to get in, to become cops in the first place. So it's focused on why most cops get into the policing business in the first place. A better relationship, right, with their own management. And that would be the management of the city, and the better relationship with their community members. That's what's in it for the cops. What's in it for the community? I think we can all guess, right? Effective policing, empathetic policing, just policing, less harmful policing, the drones and the license plate readers, right? And the gunshot detectors and the AI and all of these things coming out. Very important that we think about less harmful policing, anticipating the unintended possible harmful consequences. The kind of policing we always wanted, and policing we'd be proud for our kids to be part of. That's important. If this young man in this photograph has this type of relationship with a cop, he or she may want to grow up and become a police officer themselves, and we need that. So what makes a peace officer department, right? Well, as we talked about, it's smart on crime. It's in line with what communities want. It's consistent with policing's mandate. About 80% of statutes refer to cops. I mentioned that before. And it actually operationalized the practical implications of being a community peacekeeper for the entire department. Let's talk about something that we actually popularized, and that is the Hippocratic Oath for Policing. What you're reading on the screen is called the Peace Officer Promise. And what it is we were thinking, wow, well, let's see, every doctor in America, really probably in the world, takes what's known as the Hippocratic Oath, right, Hippocrates, and that is the oath to do their best to do no harm to their patients while trying to cure them. Well, let's change those words out and let's make it an Hippocratic Oath for Policing, which we call the Peace Officer Promise. And it goes like this. We, the members of the Richland County Sheriff's Department, promise that while doing our best to control crime, we will do everything in our power to do no harm to the communities we serve and protect. Wow. When a police department gets up and says that, and I'm going to show you a video in a minute of one who did, it has an amazing impact on the community. They are seen. We use a word when we do mediations for instance, police-involved shootings, seen, heard, and valued. That's what communities want. That's how people can build trust with one another, and policing agencies can build trust among their communities. And so we encourage agencies to personalize it, right? So it's not everybody who's going to say the same, to do their best, to promise to do no harm while doing everything in their power to control everything in their power to do no harm to the communities we serve, is very important, but there are other ways to do it. And these are actual things that agencies have said. This is the one I love, which when a police department calls us and says, we've had a police-involved shooting, what could we do? We hear you, we've reflected on it, and it's affected us deeply. And as a result, this is what we promise you. Wouldn't that be amazing if everybody said that when they were in a position, whether you're in a commercial business, whether you're in public service or public safety? It's so important that people, again, feel seen, heard, and valued. So let me do something. Oh, you know what? I'm going to stop sharing for a moment, and I'm going to share again because I want to show this video. And I did not do what I thought. What I wanted to do was to use share sound and then optimize for the video clip. So let's do this, and I'll share this. And we got this going, and let's go ahead and watch this video.
Sheriff Leon Lott further declares his deputies to be peace officers.
Richland County right now is faced with gun violence at a high rate. Our youth are dying and our communities are suffering.
For the last 4 years, the Richland County Sheriff's Department has been demonstrating their deputies are, and will be, a reassuring presence regardless of the situation. And in doing so, they are peace officers. Beginning in 2018, Sheriff Leon Lott and his Richland County Sheriff's Department took part in an initiative to determine the impact of words in public perception.
If you look on the back of Richland County Sheriff's Department cards, you'll see two words, peace officer, on the back of it.
It branded its vehicles with the words peace officer. Then in 2020, it outfitted deputy uniforms with the words peace officer stitched below deputy sheriff.
And then 2 years ago, Police2Peace came and said, let's take it another step. Let's put it on the uniforms. So we did. Our job is to keep the peace. We're peace officers. Peace officers. That's who every one of us who wear this uniform, our job is. Sometimes we're guardians, sometimes we're warriors, but the majority of the time, we're peace officers.
Now in 2022, Sheriff Leon Lott further declares his deputies to be peace officers. In a press conference on the grounds of the South Carolina State House, the sheriff announced the Peace Officer Promise, where he publicly pledged to do no harm to the communities.
We, the members of the Richland County Sheriff's Department, promise that while doing our best to prevent and mitigate crime and criminal activity, we will also do everything in our power to do no harm to the communities that we serve and protect. In point of fact, we see our responsibility as peace officers to befriend and bring a tangible sense of security and harmony to those whom we have sworn to serve and protect. And this we promise we will. That is our promise as the Richland County Sheriff's Department, that we will be peace officers.
By this reaffirmation by the Sheriff's Department, it lets our citizens know that the Sheriff's Department plans to uphold this oath and treat our communities fairly, safely, and protect and serve the way they should. It also says, hey, let's come together because we need to all do the same thing and work together in order to save our communities.
It's more than just two words, peace officer. It's something we live by. And this is a pledge that we've lived by for quite some time. Now we just demonstrated it. We demonstrated it on our cars. We demonstrated it on our uniforms. Now we demonstrate it by taking that pledge. And by me reciting this pledge, I pledge that for every one of us who wear this uniform that works at Richland County Sheriff's Department. It's more than words. It's something that we're going to live by and continue to live by.
The department serves and protects.
I just wanted to share that. Hold on one second. Get the video to stop playing. Let me continue on, and we'll go ahead and share the screen again. And then I'm going to take you in and show you some of the trainings and also some of the research we do. So just going back and talking about the types of things that are in the Peace Officer Promise, what we recommend is that there are time-bound and measurable goals. Remember, I recited the words, we hear you, it's affected us deeply, and this is what we're going to do about it. That's what these time-bound and measurable goals are. So they're concrete measurements of what the desired effect of the Peace Officer Promise will be for a community. It's time-bound by this date, and it's measurable, for instance, reduced by this amount. So each agency can commit to its own set of concrete measurements. We're committed to de-escalation training by June 2024. And this is what the promise looks like in my community. So why bring the Peace Officer Promise to your community? Well, the Peace Officer Project and the Peace Officer Promise, it betters community lives, community members' lives. Rightful policing is policing that's effective, empathetic, and just. You know, I say that often, and sometimes I feel like a broken record in that sense, but getting that through the nation, if every police agency in the nation had those 3 words as their mission statement, I think we would see a change in policing. That would be a sea change for America. And one way it betters community members' lives is by advancing rightful policing. And then it operationalizes rightful policing by embodying the peace officers in the community. So how would a community begin? Well, consider the internal and external implications, consult with community stakeholders. This is how a police agency does it, right? You have to select the goals. You have to consult with your stakeholders. You can't do public safety to a community. You do public safety with the community. So convene a community advisory group or a review board. Develop ways to public share and announce the promise like you've just seen. And go on the road. Get that police chief and that police agency on the road, as you can see right here, right? To share the promise and the Peace Officer Project with stakeholder groups. So Jesselyn had wanted me to show you some tools. This is what we call the Peace Officer Project Toolkit. And so it's a resource guide for policing agencies. And look what it contains, all of these things that a police agency can download. There are white papers about the Peace Officer Project and the promise. There's a customizable PowerPoint presentation like you just saw, which they can put their own logo on. There's a model social media plan, a press release, website language, a discussion paper, on hiring in the spirit of service, as I mentioned. There's instructions for making their own documentary film captured. In fact, we make the documentary film for them if agencies will send us their footage. And there's a model implementation list. So right here on the screen, if you want to copy that project toolkit, you can point your phones at this, which is a QR code, which will lead you to it. I'll leave this up here for a moment. And Jesselyn, I can no longer see you. I used to be able to see you before, but maybe I'll click on participants. But go ahead and let me know when people are finished seeing this, or I'll just move on.
We get a show of thumbs when folks are
People are good?
ready.
People good?
I think so, yes.
Great. All right. And then the virtual peace officer training, which is this. This is a screenshot of the actual training platform that we use. This happens to be for Green Bay, Wisconsin Police Department, where it's a virtual platform that they used in conjunction with their in-person training, which is here. And that is on-site peace officer training, which you can see is happening here in Arizona, where we had 11 police agencies together in a single conference center, taking our entire peace officer training course, which is between 5 and 8 hours in person with a sitting police chief as the trainer, while deputies as far flung away as 300 miles were on their cell phones taking exactly the same training. We thought that was very cool. And so with that, I'm going to show you what the training looks like. And so let me go ahead and bring up, I'm going to bring up a new share here. And hold on one second. I'm on a very large screen. So let me bring this up. Here we go. All right, so many of you have probably seen our website already. I know Jesselyn had that. And so this is our homepage, et cetera, et cetera. We got great looking pictures of actual agencies helping real people. We love that. And so, but we can go ahead, and many agencies do, sign into the trainings. Let's go ahead and sign into the training. It's right here. And so this is the training platform. I can go ahead and put my name in. We have, agencies coming in all the time. When they go in, they see a customized version of the platform just for them, but we're going to go in as me since I'm an admin. You can see what that looks like. And so here we are on the training platform. I understand that people, if they wanted to, took chapter 4 in terms of the training so that they could learn a little bit about and see the production value of the training. You'll look here, and you can do a bunch of stuff. We have a training center where we have a whole bunch of courses. We can go through courses, and they're right here, where the different courses can be taken. We have police leaders and police officers and association representatives, those are unions and community members, et cetera. And then we can go out here. And the other things we can do on this platform, which is a very robust platform, you can keep an agency calendar, and there's resources and report cards and usage, and all of this. Certifications is very important. because what this platform does is that it provides an agency certification for state certification credits for ongoing training. And so the program is certified in about 30 states and nationally, and we're working on the other states. And then this in terms of in-person and online, so that the identical training is both in-person and online for agencies which take it, which again, back to the Arizona example, is where agencies can, maybe not everybody can come. How can you get 300 officers in a single conference room? Who's going to be keeping the peace, right? So some people would take it virtually in order to have exactly the same training. We think that that's a great feature. And in fact, as I've said recently to some government agencies, that platform is so robust, we could put every police officer in the entire United States on it right now and have them all become peace officers. Now there's an idea, right? All the police officers are taking the same training in order to have the same result. That would be terrific. So let me go back. I'm going to go back and back to the PowerPoint here. Oh, and Jessalyn wanted to know the departments we've engaged with. They don't fit on a page. This is a smattering. But as you can see from the badges on the screen, we've worked in a lot of different places, from the Deep South to the Pacific Northwest and really every place in between. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about metrics research, right? So here's a question, and there's a phrase in policing called evidence-based policing, right? So evidence-based policing, evidence that something works. So what's the evidence that this works? Well, as an economist, I've been doing surveys since we actually started Police2Peace. And what we do typically when we work with an police agency is we do time 1 and time 2 sentiment surveys before and after the training. And so it has to be sufficient. Before is easy, but sufficiently after the training so that both the community and the workforce sentiment can be gauged. And I'm going to show you a little bit about what that looks like. I'm going to show you one of our sample data outputs in terms of slicing and dicing the data. And then we're collecting use of force and community complaint data about the agency 1 year before the training and 1 year after the training. That should be very interesting going forward in terms of what we can find out about the effect that this is having. So let me right now, I'm going to share my screen and show you a workforce survey. So this is an example survey, right? It is, it's organizational, meaning it's the policing workforce. So here's what we do. We collect a whole bunch of data. We collect all of these demographics, age, assignment, that means whether they're, a detective or whether they're, in community policing or, a drug task force, department status, right? Are they civilian? Are they executive? Are they, a non-executive officer? The duration of time they've been in the department, very important. Are they new officers or are they older officers? I can tell you that in some agencies, we've learned that younger officers may not believe that the community trust and confidence in the police is very high, while the older officers do, and it's the same police department. So what's up with that? What we should really do is be training the younger officers about the community, the sentiment of the community so that they trust and like them back. Education levels, that's important. College education, what level of education are they in officers to have these views? Gender, right? Race, rank, resident, right? Worked elsewhere, all these important demographics. And then we ask questions. Here's 2 sample questions. Okay. So by age, campus community support the department. It's a Likert scale, right? So we have agree, strongly agree, no, neither agree nor disagree, strongly disagree, disagree. So we have all these different, and then we have colors, right? The strongly agree and disagree. So the younger officers, right, here for the question, campus community support the department. This was done with a police department that serves a college campus, right? So you have younger officers, they kind of believe it, right? And so look at these. So neither agree nor disagree. These are the younger officers, right? And then you have officers who are a little bit older. Oh, and then you have here in this, you have older officers who strongly disagree. Oops about that. But then you have officers here, right? So you can slice and dice. Why this is important is because a police department and a police leader can look at this data and learn whether there's an issue within both the community and the workforce that should be addressed, such as what I mentioned, and that is do younger officers believe that the community doesn't support the police? Well, where do they get that belief? Where does that come from, right? Is that something that the police agency can change in terms of, sorry, I have an alarm going off. Is that something that the police agency can change in terms of education? Or what else do they need to do in order to help the officers or the community understand what may be going on that they may not perceive is going on? So that's a little bit about our data. And then I'll share screen again here, and we can go back, and then we'll just sort of wrap up, and then we can take some questions. We've gone through the research, right? And this last bit of research, collecting use of force data and community complaint data, that is going to be a really long-term research, longitudinal research, as they say, because that's going to take years and years to show things. And so, as I said, I had questions. I did put this up, and that is if you want more information on Police2Peace, if you haven't been to our website, you can go here, right? And just point your camera at the QR code, and you'll be taken directly to our website. I'll leave that up for a minute. And then also, this is my contact information. I think we're probably done, and we can go ahead and do questions. Jocelyn, I hope that was what you had in mind.
That was great. Thank you so much. You provided us with such a strong overview, both of some of the pressing issues in policing today, as well as how Police2Peace is working to address them. And can I just say, from a research perspective, I'm wildly excited about all of the data you're collecting. Those longitudinal studies are going to be amazing, and are going to provide us with so much information to learn from. So I'm really excited to see that.
Only we started 20 years ago, right, with community policing.
If only. I know that hindsight is always a kicker. But students, what are your thoughts? What are your reactions? What are your questions or reactions to what we've just heard?
Yeah, sorry, Kimberly, did you? Okay. No, yeah, my research, the fellows know Justin's very familiar, but Lisa, mine is mostly about police use of deceptive practices, since there is, like you've been mentioning a lot, that there's not a lot of national rules. I mean, a lot of us law students here have taken criminal procedure and know what the police can and can't do, but there is a lot of flexibility and discretion, like you mentioned. And one of them also is police are able to use deceptive practices. So I definitely understand the affirmative principles that you've set forth to kind of lead that internal reform, instead of some of the work that I think a lot of people are looking to is from the court, and for maybe some white pages, kind of doing shoving approaches, saying you can't use deceptive practices, and instead trying to, I really appreciate everything you've shared. It's not just about not lying during interrogations and investigations and manipulating unsophisticated parties, but it's a reflection also. It's another example of that discretion that you mentioned earlier about the community's perception. So that's a little bit about my research, and I'm really glad that that the paradigm shift can help ameliorate my research's concerns, in addition to kind of those shove methods that I'm currently looking into. So I just wanted to give a double thumbs up for what you guys do. Yeah, and if you are aware of that practice, it's an unfortunate practice. More than impounding a car, it is lying to people, and there's really no constitutional safeguards for that right now.
That's right. And so back to Tyree Nichols, no lower policy is going to change that. How? Right? Punishment after the fact, it's culture. So if people have a different mindset, if they're there in the spirit of service, right? I can see why it might happen, and then why they might do it out of fear of recrimination. With that said, generally speaking, attracting people who are there for the spirit of service, and who would feel that is unjust, that is our work.
Kimberly, did you have something?
Yeah, so similar to what Derek said, thank you so much for coming in and talking to the class. Something that definitely stuck out for me in my research, I'm focusing on more on federal funding on correspondent models. But I have definitely become well versed in the concept that there really is no uniformity when it comes to a national level for police training, and this can create sub issues. So I think that Police2Peace is definitely doing a good job in at least trying to ameliorate that issue. And so what really stood out to me was the police promise. It was similar to the Hippocratic Oath, and I thought that was definitely a good tool to at least try and reach out to the community and just reaffirm to police officers and to the community of their own duties. And I guess my question to you, Lisa, is what what do you think was the most difficult aspect to that Police2Peace had to face when trying to deal with this lack of uniformity? So how did you I guess basically market your organization to other departments?
Well, that is a great question. It may go back to our name, and that is peace and peace officer, because it is the legal term for police in 70% of states, and 80% of the states use it in some way. I would say that, and it sounds like a blanket statement, all, if not virtually every cop in America thinks of themselves as a peace officer if you ask them. So it is the one common thread. It's the common bond among all police officers, right? And so if we can go to that, and we can build something on top of that, and we can build something that they want to be a part of, that's pro-social rather than punitive, right? No one wants to be punished, and they don't want to be in a profession that is punished. They want to do something for the greater good, and many surveys have been done. That's why they joined in the first place. So, appealing to people's better instincts, their better angels, number one. Using a common term that is common among virtually every police officer in America. They would answer to that if you asked them that. They would say yes, which is terrific. And then what that word simply does, as an economist looking at research, what does the simple introduction of the term into the community do? Well, it does change people. Those cops see that every day on their uniforms and on their vehicles. They're reminded of it, and the community is reminded of it. And the kids come up and they say, "What's a peace officer? Why are you different?" Right? It's just stimulating a conversation that never would have been had. I really think we need to transform policing from the inside. Certainly better policing comes out of laws and regulations, and many reforms have had impact. Obviously no reform has worked. And, just the word reform is punitive in and of itself, right? Rather than moving in a different direction and nudging an entire profession, which, as you know, is so diverse and so widespread and so, and so unable to be captured with a single law or policy. How else are you going to do it besides appealing to the way everybody wants policing to be? That's a challenge.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
Ahmed, I saw your hand raised.
Yeah, I did. I just want to say thanks, Lisa, for sharing all of that. It kind of goes hand in hand with what my project is on, which is focusing on procedural justice for the Detroit Police Department and what that means to them and how they go about it. So they do have a few meetings coming up that I'm going to have to be attending. They have community meetings where they bring people together and they want to create bonds with the community. So maybe this is something I'll bring up to them, because it sounds like it would fit hand in hand. I also really like the sentiment about it's not focusing on defunding the police or like abolishing them, because a lot of the conversation or research that I've had so far, it's either or. It's either do so much more for them or just completely remove them. And my personal experience living in Detroit for 27 years now, working on the worst sides of town for many years, it's really I don't see either or as an option, so I really like where it kind of meets in the middle ground, and it provides a good option to kind of work with everyone. So.
Well, thank you. Again, people have views, and Americans, I'm working with a group that's not an American, and they said, you know, we love about Americans, they always express themselves. And they were kind of making fun of us. But all Americans have opinions, right? In my opinion, we need the police, but we need good policing. We need policing that we've defined as effective, empathetic, and just, right? And in those community meetings with the Detroit Police Department, if I think you bring that up, nobody would disagree with you. Not even the defunders would disagree with that if we were really doing policing that way. Well, reach out to me, because procedural justice is a huge part of this. More important, I'm sure you know the research, when people are asked later what their memory was of a police encounter, it's not what the outcome was, it's how they were treated at the time. That's what they remember. Were they treated in a just manner? Were they able to be heard? When the officer came up to the car, did they say, "Hi, I'm Officer Schmedley, and do you know why I stopped you today? I was concerned about you. You were weaving. Whatever it was, your taillight is out." Rather than doing something else, which is a little more different, maybe cold seeming, which could frighten someone. And today, that type of frightening experience could lead to all kinds of things, which would be tragedies. And so procedural justice is really at the heart of what we do.
Definitely, I agree. Yeah, they have a large summit coming up. They do about 3 of them a year, where in order to be invited to the summit, you had to have filed a complaint to the Detroit Police Department. It had to be resolved. And so I'm going to that as well. So hopefully I'll be able to talk to them.
Nice.
Bring this up. Thank you.
Terrific.
Lisa,
Thank you.
Ahmed raises an interesting point that I wonder that you could expand a bit on. How do departments how do y'all select which departments you provide training for? What does that identification look like? Have there ever been any departments that you have refused training to? What is is there an application process? Can you tell us more about that?
Well, it's not so much an application, it's a personal preference. The police leader. So in a police agency, the police leader, the police chief, or the police chief or the sheriff, right, is leading the organization like the leader in the company. When he or she decides this is the direction to go, then the department goes that way. So we mostly interact with police leaders, police chiefs and sheriffs, who learn about us through a variety of ways. We have done research within the industry. We have very high name recognition because we have a cool name, right? It says it all in that sense. People remember it, so that's kind of good. And then anytime you're introducing a product, I'd mentioned that I'm originally from the high-tech industry, right? You introduce a product, you're looking for the early adopters. Well, we go out through media and through stories about us and through forums like this and speaking at conferences. We get the early adopters. Sheriff Leon Lott, who called me up, right, on the phone. He's like, "We want peace officer on our vehicles." Well, that was it was a very early adopter thing to do for him. And they're a very forward-thinking police agency. Redlands, California was another agency that was very, very forward-thinking and interested in research. So we captured these early adopters, and then we move throughout the agency, allowing agencies to come to us, right? You can't force this on anybody. You can't force it on a workforce, and you can't force it on a police department. And even in consent decrees, right, which, as you know, are legal mandates, court-ordered legal mandates for cities and police departments to engage differently when they've had an issue or a pattern and practice of issues. Very difficult to get the police to change when you have those types of external things. They have to want to change. So what we do is we appeal to the early adopters. We have police chiefs and sheriffs running, go out there spreading the word and going to meetings, such as Ahmed might go to and talking about it a little bit. And then we're funded. We're actually funded by grants from the federal government, so that any police department or sheriff's department can apply to have their peace officer training paid for by 2 agency organizations. One is the Bureau of Justice Assistance and National Technical Training and Assistance Center, and the other is called CRITEC, which is a partnership of the COPS office, which is an office of the DOJ, an agency of the DOJ, and the IACP, which is the International Association of Chiefs of Police. So with that, with funding taken care of, working through the early adopters of the 18,000, I would say we've touched about 1/3 of the police departments in the country by now in some way. They've downloaded our programs. We see them on the website. All of our stuff is downloadable. And then we've trained in the hundreds, right? Where we've trained either the individual police leaders and now we're working through the entire agencies. So it'll be a long time. I may look young. I may be doing this when I'm 20 years from now. with my wheelchair, with my life with my cane, and you know, trying to get the police to be peaceful. It may take a while, as has been said. You know, policing is like a giant super tanker going across the ocean. How do you turn a super tanker? Very slowly and very carefully. It doesn't mean it doesn't turn, but it does mean that it's going to take a while.
And how big is your team? Recognizing what you're trying to accomplish, I'm curious about, like, yeah, what does your staff look like?
Well, we have a core team of about 30 people. I would say about half of which are police, former police professionals who are working with us, and they act as trainers. I never do training, and that is the training that is done is all by police professionals for police professionals, because that's the way that it's going to be. A credible messenger is going to come into someone's, you know, a policing agency and deliver a message most effectively. And so we have police trainers who do that around the country. We have a core group of, I call the kids, and the kids are, you know, the social media and the graphics and other kinds of things happening. Because, you know, we need a hip image. We have a hip logo. We have a great background. We have a great website. You know, we have to be cool if we're going to really change policing, right? It has to be something that people want to be a part of. So all of that comes together. And then we have project managers when we do individual projects, and we're doing, for instance, a police-involved shooting or other type of project within a city, and they expand and contract based on a contract basis, because most of our work is contract basis. So it's project contract basis for an individual project.
That's really commendable. Melody.
Hi, sorry, I've had my camera off because I had to pick up a kiddo from school, so I'm zooming from the road. But I echo everyone. Thank you so much for your time. This has been so informative, so enlightening, and I appreciate all of the work that you and the organization are doing. And I in the city of Detroit, the use of ShotSpotter, and just looking into the research of its effectiveness and how it's being utilized in Detroit. And so I'm curious what your view is of technology, and specifically some of these things that are more like on the surveillance side, like spot shotter and cameras and things. How do you view that with the idea of police being a peace officer?
We have a very well-developed and holistic view, and that is the unintended possible harmful consequences of policing's well-meaning actions, including technologies, must be examined. And I've specifically spoken on gunshot detection to cities using that phrase. They must take into account the fact that when these microphones, if they are, or other technologies which are gunshot detection, which may be vibrational, when they're detecting things, what are they really doing? Where are they putting them? Are they only putting them in communities of color? How would you feel about that? The whole thing, right, needs to be considered with a holistic lens for the entire community, and anticipating that in advance rather than the opposite of evidence-based policing, which is, well, we'll do it and we'll see if it works, and we're not going to think in advance about what harm it might bring. Well, you know, the drone over the school, or the gunshot detection only in in communities of color, or the cameras or the license plate readers or the AI for facial recognition, all of this stuff needs to be considered within the holistic view of the community. That's a peace officer. That is keeping the peace, promoting safety, wellness, well-being, engagement, having people live their best possible lives. That is a peace officer. Simply controlling crime, yeah, we could do that. We could be like countries which have national police, and all kinds of things happen which are not constitutionally correct in the United States. So we're going to have to take a different route. We're going to have to engage the police and the communities in these new technologies. And Melody, I'd be happy to speak with you about them. We've done a lot of research, and we have quite a few, even more thoughts about it than I may have expressed today.
Thank you. Yes, I will follow up on that. I would love to hear any more of your thoughts on that. It's an interesting issue for sure.
It is, and growing.
Alex.
Hey, so I echo what everyone else has said. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate having an expert in this field, and someone who's pushing the boundary of what's possible in policing. My question kind of goes along the lines of the Richland County approach. I know that you touched on that. When you have a policing force or a police force that is, I guess, more strapped to their car, a little bit walled off from the community, maybe because of whether they're in a rural area or not, what kind of strategies and tips do you give those officers in kind of giving their patrols the walking the beat type of feel, letting them engage in the community when maybe they can only get around in the community in a patrol car or something like that?
Right. Well, that is a very good question. And in fact, we see two models. We see the highway patrol model, which is driving through a city and at 80 miles an hour, whatever they're doing, right? Because it's a highway, and they do not have a lot of opportunity to engage with the community. And we've had discussions with highway patrol organizations about what that is like and how they might engage more. And then you have the sheriffs, right, which you're talking about. Most police departments are not in rural areas, right? That would be a city. There have to be some sort of community. But you have these far-flung counties. Richland County is 500,000, right? It's 400 square miles. It is a big place, even for 800, police vehicles. And so to get to know the community, as Sir Robert Peel said, the police is part of the community and the community is part of the police. And that sheriff has opportunities for the police and the community to engage. The police, the deputies go to community functions. They spend time with the community. There are community outreach groups with which we work, which get together and bring things to community members. The deputies go out to schools, they go out to events. They're all around the community as much as they can be, which is really the only way to do it. Be known as much as you can, right? And sitting in the vehicle, it's very protected. And it was very cool for a while, again, with television shows you've never heard of, like NYPD Blue. But it's really not great for community engagement. And it kind of, it's the opposite of community policing in some sense. Getting to know the community so that they know you, so that the young people want to be deputies and officers, so that the people trust you enough to give you information which is necessary, right? So you hear the phrase, if you see something, say something. Well, that's not going to happen in a community that doesn't like and trust the police, right? For all kinds of reasons. The trust is that it will be kept in confidence. And the like is, if I don't like you, I'm not going to help you. So that can be turned around. And in fact, the Detroit Police Department is doing things to try to do that. I know, Ahmed, you're probably aware of some of them, but we've had some interaction with them as well. And for a big city and a big urban center, they're doing a lot along those lines, and a lot can be done in order to get out of their vehicles, get with the community, have the types of forums that Ahmed was talking about, and have the community know you and know your names, right? So that they know that there's someone that they can trust and not just a telephone number.
Thank you.
Sure, of course.
Others, thoughts, reactions, feelings? I'm really taken by this idea of the revised peace officer mission statement. Unfortunately, we don't have our student from Lincoln Memorial University here, but that's actually one of the assignments that we ask of students at the Police Law, Policy, and Practices course that's being taught across a few of our membership schools, where we ask them in breakout groups to draft an ideal mission statement for a fictional police department, so that we can try to see what are the values that they feel should be integral to policing and public safety, and how does it align with the current mission statement for the department in their area. How does it differ? And I feel like it's a really useful brainstorm and thinking about how the language informs the mission.
And here's some policing wisdom. First of all, people can only remember 7 words. So we're going to wonder about that. If you have a mission statement that's more than a page long, it's too long. If it's more than a paragraph long, it's probably too long. So you know what? We have 3 words. If those were the 3 words, we'd be fine. The country would be great. And people can remember 3 words. Anybody can remember that. So that's what we'd be for. And if someone ever comes up on an exam and says that, they should get an A, because I think it really captures it, right?
It's also much easier to put on the cars, right? And the uniforms. So I think that's great.
Exactly.
It also reminds me, in a previous life, I was working a lot in strategic communications for police agencies in other countries. And I heard from a number of those departments, like, what is it that we need to do to communicate that we are a community-oriented department? And my first thought was always, well, it's not about the communication strategy. First, you need to ensure that you are embodying this ethos. So
Right.
first,
You need to
what I
walk
really
the
valued,
talk.
exactly, what I really appreciate about the work that y'all are doing is that you're promoting both that cultural and organizational shift in addition to the larger outreach initiatives, because I think it is really only through that kind of whole of society, a whole of change approach that real change is possible. So
Right.
I know you've been thanked numerous times by our students, which is awesome. I wholly believe in leading with a culture of appreciation as well. So thank you so much for being here.
By
I
all
don't know if
means, it was
folks,
our pleasure.
thank you. Other thoughts, anything before we conclude? Awesome. Well, yes,
Well,
appreciate
Jessalyn, be sure
everyone's
to give
time.
my contact information out to people. I'd be happy to. We are in the spirit of service. So people need things. The more we can get the idea and the concepts out there for this type of policing, yeah, I think the better off we'll all be. So please reach out.
Fantastic. Of course. Sorry, Kimberly.
Yeah, Lisa, just on that note, does your organization offer any internships or anything like that?
We do.
Okay,
Yes.
I'll make sure to
Awesome.
Like as the young people say, like
we
and
don't have a formal
subscribe, right?
program. Yeah, we don't have a program. Just reach out to me, right? And they tend to be bespoke, as we say, and that is because all the terms differ and the universities differ, et cetera. But we've had the program in the past and we very much enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
I will also say
Yes,
Lisa
thank
is
you.
fairly active on LinkedIn. So following Police2Peace on LinkedIn, as well as signing up for updates on the Police2Peace website, it would be a great way to stay apprised of the various webinars and additional information sharing opportunities that they have. So yeah, make sure that we're availing of the additional communications mechanisms that exist. But thank you all for being here this evening, a very productive and informative session. Have a safe and healthy weekend, and I'll look forward to seeing our students back here next Friday. In the meantime, if you have questions for me, please don't hesitate to reach out. But with you
I
all
will
in
sign off.
community in the meantime. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thank you all.